One little hug changed everything. Spring had returned once again. The trees were full of fresh green leaves, flowers covered the fields, and warm sunshine filled the little village. Emily was 4 years old now. She had become very curious. When she was younger, she asked, "What is this?" Now she asked something much harder. Why? Sometimes 20 times in a row. Why do birds fly away every year? Why does rain smell different in spring? Why do people cry? Why do people stop smiling? Eliza sometimes laughed, sometimes she answered, and sometimes she simply smiled and said, "When you're older, you'll understand." But Emily never liked waiting. She wanted to understand everything now. There was one street in the village where children never played. It wasn't because their parents told them not to. It was because they were afraid. At the end of the street stood an old house. The windows were almost always closed. The garden was covered with weeds. The fence leaned to one side. On the old gate hung a rusty sign, "Do not enter." An old man named Johann lived there. Nobody knew exactly how old he was. Some people said 70, others said 90. But everyone agreed on one thing: he didn't like anyone. If children came too close, he walked outside with his wooden stick and shouted loudly, "Go away! Don't step into my yard! You don't belong here!" So every child stayed away from the house. Every child, except Emily. One afternoon, she noticed a tiny orange kitten trapped behind the old fence. It cried softly, trying to find a way out. "Oh, don't be scared," Emily whispered. She carefully reached her little hand through the wooden boards, but the kitten became even more frightened. Just then, the front door opened with a loud creak. Johann stepped outside. He was tall, thin. His back was slightly bent. His face looked hard, as if he had forgotten how to smile many years ago. "What are you doing here?" he shouted. Emily jumped a little, but she didn't run away. Instead, she looked straight into his eyes. Then she asked, "Is this your kitten?" The old man looked surprised. "No." "Then why are you shouting?" Johann opened his mouth, but no words came out. It had been a very long time since anyone had asked him such a simple question. That evening, everyone in the village was talking. "Did you hear? That little girl spoke to Johann, and she's still alive." "That's impossible." When Eliza heard the story, she became worried. "Emily," she said seriously, "don't go near his house again." "Why?" "Because—" Eliza stopped. She didn't really know the answer. Everyone was afraid of Johann, but nobody remembered why anymore. Fear had simply become a habit. The next day, Emily walked back to the old house. This time, she carried a small piece of apple pie on a plate. She knocked softly. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door slowly opened. Johann frowned. "You again?" Emily held out the plate. "My mom baked a pie. I thought maybe you would like something sweet, too." The old man looked silently at the pie. His eyes became softer for just a second. "I don't like visitors," he said. Emily smiled. "Then you can think of it as pie without a visitor." For the first time in many years, Johann didn't know what to say. Slowly, he took the plate. A few days later, Emily came back. Then she came again and again. Sometimes she brought wildflowers. Sometimes she showed him a picture she had drawn. Sometimes she proudly counted to 20. "I can even count backward now." She laughed. Johann listened quietly. He didn't speak very much, but he never told her to leave again. Little by little, the silence inside the old house began to change. One afternoon, Emily noticed a photograph on a dusty shelf. It showed a little girl. She looked about Emily's age. She had two long braids and a bright smile. Is she your granddaughter? Emily asked. Johann became very still. For a long time he said nothing. Finally he answered in a quiet voice. No, she was my daughter. Emily looked at the picture again. Where is she now? The old man slowly sat down. His hands began to shake. She died. During the war. She was only 5 years old. His eyes filled with tears. After that, I could never listen to children laughing again. Every laugh reminded me of her. So I chased children away. Not because I hated them, but because I loved one little girl so much. And I never learned how to live without her. The room became completely silent. Emily didn't ask another question. She simply walked over to him, wrapped her little arms around him, and hugged him as tightly as she could. No words, no fear, just kindness. Johann froze. He hadn't been hugged in many years. Then something happened that nobody thought they would ever see. The old man began to cry, quietly, like someone carrying a heavy heart for far too long. A week later, the whole village noticed something strange. Johann walked into the town square. He sat on a bench. For the first time in years, he watched children playing, without anger, without shouting. He simply watched. People walked past him and whispered to each other. Is that really Johann? What happened to him? Then something even more surprising happened. A little boy tripped and fell. He scraped his knee and started crying. Before anyone else could move, Johann stood up. He gently helped the boy to his feet, brushed the dust from his clothes, and smiled. It will be all right, he said kindly. The strongest people always have a few scars. The little boy smiled through his tears. Across the square, Emily smiled too. She knew. The old man had remembered how to live again. That evening, Eliza tucked Emily into bed. Then she asked softly, how did you do something that nobody else could? Emily thought for a moment. Then she gave a little shrug. He wasn't a bad man. He was just lonely. For a very, very long time. Eliza kissed her daughter's forehead. She looked out of the window. Across the street, Johann's old porch was glowing with the warm light of a lantern. For the first time in many years, he had lit it. Not because he was afraid of the dark, but because he was hoping someone might come to visit. Sometimes people don't need someone to fix their lives. Sometimes all they need is one person who isn't afraid to knock on the door. Sometimes a person doesn't need help. Sometimes they just need one person who stops being afraid of them.